to folks on the West Coast. And if you're elsewhere, good afternoon for my East Coast and Midwest folks. If you're here to discuss rapid reskilling program design and how teaching and learning strategies and program design impact enrollment, retention, and workforce connections, you are in the right place. My name is Anna Fontes, and I'm a program officer at ECMC Foundation. I have the privilege of moderating today's session featuring Dr. Kim Moore from Tallahassee Community College and curating an engaging session. We're hoping to maximize the interactivity as much as possible. Dr. Moore has prepared a fantastic slide deck for us that really features a lot of different strategies as well as her personal experiences advancing outcomes for adult learners. Please start to pop your questions in the chat throughout the presentation. Some of them will address in real time, and anything that we don't address will address at the end of the session. At ECMC Foundation, I oversee a portfolio that's mainly comprised of post-secondary programs and initiatives that advance persistence and completion while ensuring students are prepared to compete and thrive in the workforce. For us at the Foundation, those programs include post-secondary CTE, apprenticeships, internships, cooperative education, and more. We've seen a lot of innovative projects from the field, combining a few of those things at once, but really appreciate the intention, enthusiasm, and excitement, and to be honest, heightened focus on maximizing outcomes for adult learners, particularly those facing one or multiple barriers. While the Foundation only funds programs that are institution-led, these programs exist in both credit and non-credit contexts. And also in strictly workforce and business environments, which can be confusing for individuals without the knowledge to navigate the system. Students who have the most dire needs continue to be pulled into short-term workforce programs or boot camps, many of which promise rapid wealth gains for students, but fail to provide credit-backed credentials or student supports to optimize the outcomes. Some of the projects that we've been focusing on, we've seen students who are technically enrolled at the college, but because they're in a non-credit program, they're not allowed to access the library. They're not labeled as a student, they're labeled as a participant. They don't get a bus pass, etc. And so there are these cases in which a student can be enrolled and not fully access the supports and really achieve their full potential as a learner. In addition to the complex economic mobility landscape for learners without credentials, businesses large and small are struggling to recruit and retain skilled talent, which also often pushes non-credit programs to the forefront. And we're not seeing them experience the same gains over time as students in for-credit programs. Within post-secondary, the continued internal silos between academics, career preparation, and student affairs exacerbate these challenges and complicate a student's access to credit-bearing programs and support. So we're wondering, is there a world where many of these internal departments collaborate and connect and are talking to each other, especially between the education and workforce side, to support students and adults to thrive in the workforce? And I'm proud to say, welcome to Dr. Kim Moore's world. As the vice president, for workforce innovation, Dr. Kim Moore is responsible for developing strategic solutions that address the needs of employers and those seeking to enter and advance in the workforce. She's at Tallahassee Community College, and prior to joining there, she was the CEO of Workforce Plus, the regional economic workforce development body. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kim Moore, and I will be keeping an eye on the chat to see what your questions are. Thank you in advance for an engaging session.
Well, thank you so much. I am so excited to be able to join you all virtually as it is. Lots of great content to share with you and talk about not only our journey, because I'm certain you'll find yourself in there, but really the value of reskilling and how you can do that rapid credentialing at your institution. So we're going to jump right into it, just for the sake of just adding context. It's about making the case for the adult learner. And I will share with you just a conversation roadmap. I always want to make sure that you know where we're starting and certainly where we're ending. So we'll do a brief overview of Tallahassee Community College, what we determine as our critical issue, our ability to address the issue, what did we do, and then what the implementation looked like. And certainly you always want to know truth in numbers, what were the results, what's the return on investment? And then from there, what did we learn and how are we using that information and success really to transform our institution and take it to the next level in a rapid form. So TCC, we have approximately 11,000 enrolled full-time students. We make up 3 county service area, of which it's both urban and rural. Interesting point for you to know, our college is actually situated in the poorest zip code in the state of Florida. We don't take that lightly. We recognize that this is a great opportunity to impact folks that need it most. Moreover, I'd point out to you that 21% of our population within this area have, or if you will, a poverty status. All of those are critical, and all of those are areas of opportunity for us to make sure that not only is it about access, but clearly it's about opportunities to advance as well. Some of the things that we are super proud about in the work that we're doing, we were recognized as a bellwether top 10 workforce program, not only last year, but also this year as well. We were recognized as one of the top 10 relative to Aspen, top 50 in the most current session, 2023 Best Employer, Achieving the Dream Leader College, and then of course the Leah Meyer Austin Award as well. So lots of good things going on. And honestly, it would not be able to happen were it not for removing the silos and recognizing that it's just not a workforce voice, it's a student affairs, it's an academic affairs, and really it's about one college serving our one community. With respect to workforce development, the place that I live in and have lived in now for over a decade, when you think about my area, it really is diverse. There's over 70 workforce different programs that fall within this area. Of course, we have adult education, GED, and ESOL. I always tell everybody, it's the comma. We add the comma meaning that there is so much more when they get that GED. So it's never about a period at TCC. It really is about embracing lifelong learning. From there, we have specialized centers, many of which I assume that you all have as well, whether it's manufacturing, healthcare, construction, transportation, logistics. I also oversee all of our outside or outlying service centers, and of course, those specialties that might be in the way of apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeship programs, both within the community as well as behind the walls. And when I reference behind the walls, a quick little blurb there, we're actually the largest contracted workforce provider for the Florida Department of Corrections. So a number of the services that we provide, we're doing it in 8 prisons. And really it's making a difference there. And more recently, we just executed a contract where workforce services will be provided statewide with all of the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice areas. So again, a lot of this happened as a result of the mindset that we took on when we embraced rapid credentialing and this whole idea about being nimble. So what was our critical issue? It wasn't a unique issue to Tallahassee Community College. It was a unique issue for the entire world. We're experiencing the pandemic. What do? We're all trying to figure out what's going to happen to enrollment. Some of us are trying to figure that out because we're still seeing the decline. But really, we recognize just how vulnerable some populations were. And as I shared with you already, having the poorest zip code, that's where we reside. So clearly there was greater impact there. These are just some stats from that period of time. And then I'm going to talk to you about what it meant for us locally. So vulnerable industries. We realize that a lot of the adult learners that we're currently serving We're also part of the vulnerable industries that were impacted by way of COVID. And because of that, they were not likely individuals that were going to be on our traditional pathway of the 2+2 and going down the merry way of, hey, it's already preset. We recognize that these individuals, their first start was actually dealing with life. And then perhaps if they could infuse education, then that came second, and that's where we had to start. So if you were to look briefly at the chart that's here, you'd see for those that are at the lowest wage, food services, childcare service workers, personal and laundry services, accommodations, retail, we all, have those same industries and probably all saw the same impact. Well, we wanted to drill behind those numbers when we looked at our local landscape. And what we saw is that 16 to 24-year-olds were being impacted more than anybody for us. We saw that it was women, specifically when we looked at gender, minorities, and then again, the industries that I mentioned, and throw in the fact that 50% at that time of our childcare facilities had shut down across the state of Florida. A number of them have still not returned. But again, it creates the perfect storm. So we set about, what do you do? Like everyone across the state and nation. First, we listened to our learners, the ones that we wanted to attract and say, hey, there is another way, there is a better way. We heard stories like, hey, I lost childcare and because of that, I lost my job, or the position was eliminated because of what the pandemic brought on, or maybe a mom and daughter both lost their jobs at the same time and they were, working together to be able to make, the rent. Lots of different stories that pulled on our heartstrings and said, for us, we have to create a plan that really looks at the whole person. That plan for us, and this was actually driven by Dr. Sherry Rowland. She is our Vice President for Student Affairs, but creating the culture of care. We all embrace this, and honestly, it is the foundation for all of the work that we do. In a nutshell, what it stands on is that we are creating a personalized or tailored approach for our students, a concierge model, a model that recognizes that, life is happening and we need to help you plan, that we're joining you in the journey. This includes not only a focused approach for education, but it also takes us to the end game of economic mobility or social mobility. So we have what is considered for us a community of care map, and this literally helps us map out by academic communities for them from an educational standpoint. We really wanted to be specific and laser focused on what those areas would be for our college. Again, this is applied both at the advising level, but honestly across the board, that we all know what, the whole community of care looks like, what it means for our college and what it means for our students. When we looked at creating that culture of care, we then used that, and we literally did this, and most people are astonished. We've gotten awards from this, recognized statewide as well as nationally, but we were able to stand this up in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, what we call our Be Essential campaign. We were the first in the state of Florida to create a rapid credentialing program. The rapid credentialing program really focuses in on, how do we make sure that folks aren't just, preparing for a job, but they're preparing for a career. We stood up 70 workforce programs, 90 days or less, because again, even with the 90 days or less conversation, we were recognizing that, this is a hard time that folks are experiencing. And the whole idea of selling someone that, hey, it's going to take 2 years, hey, it's going to take a year to achieve some level of normalcy, we knew that that wasn't an option. So we stood up our Be Essential campaign that in essence focused on folks that were really in vulnerable spots in their lives and really moving them to a point of empowerment. We were able to do this by way of student affairs, academic affairs, and workforce development coming together. And this is just a student journey that you're looking at right now. We set for ourselves goals and standards that meant that upon learning a prospective student expressing interest in our programs, that they would get immediate acknowledgement of their interest, and that within 24 hours to 48 hours, we were saying to them that, hey, you should expect a contact back from our best advisor, best being, of course, the Be Essential support trainer. From there, we even set in standards that were totally immediately you're going to say, how in the world do they do this? Even with the point of financial aid, once we got them to the point of being interested in our program and recognizing that they needed financial support, working with our advisors, that function was actually assigned to the area of workforce development. I could actually approve and get acknowledged the financial aid award for those individuals within 24 to 48 hours. Most people think unheard of. We recognize that with our adult learners, they really needed to get feedback immediately. They could not wait. They really needed to know what's next. So our playbook, when you think about that, and then this is, of course, this is a recap, and I'm going to build up to where we are now. We used as our foundation something that would guide us for our entire institution and not just a single division. We ensured that there was college investment that we were willing to make in this system to make it happen, because we knew if we did that, others would be more likely to invest in us as well. And that did occur. Again, we became the first in the state of Florida to roll out this rapid credentialing effort, and at the same time set the standard for 27 other colleges to receive funding to do what we had just done. And we actually received additional funding to make, basically to scale the effort that we had in place. So the areas of opportunities that we saw and that we just took them on full force was financial aid. Again, we recognize that we got to close that gap, and we have to close it sooner versus later. So that's why we put this time standard on ourselves of 48 hours. You will know what your award status is. We also looked at success coaches and utilizing our career center staff, both with the point of advising about school, but also recognizing the real intent or the motivation that they were now enrolled at our institution. A number of them, large majority, how do I get to that next better job or career? So that's why we engaged the Career Center, so that we could help them along the way in that area as well while they were pursuing their education. We also worked with a number of stakeholders across campus. We knew that this could not be a single, one division take this on or department, that it really had to be about, this is who we are and this is why we're doing it. And we know our why is because of the students. Additionally, even a comprehensive marketing strategy. We recognize that the way that we had communicated prior to the pandemic was clearly not the way that we were going to attract this, I call it the adult learner that may, again, not have ever graced, our campus, to say that this is an opportunity for you. So we were very deliberate about our language, even whether it was social media, whether it was radio, whether it was print, making sure that we were falling in alignment in a way that they could best understand what it was that we were conveying. More importantly, also, we reached out with external stakeholders. Who might they be? Well, they're actually the number of nonprofits. We have over 800 nonprofits that make up our 3-county area. We recognize that a lot of our adult learners may be taking advantage of some of those services. And because of that, we wanted to make sure that we were connected with them, and that whether it was our programming or training or the services that we were offering, that the nonprofits were also serving as an anchor or vehicle to get that information out. That continues to be our model and really is a great place for success, because again, the whole idea of leveraging your partners to amplify the opportunities that exist with your institution is clearly one of the best things that you can do. And then lastly, of course, we executed the plan, but we also were able to secure additional funding to expand on an initiative that we were passionate about, that honestly then became an initiative that our state was passionate about. And I would say to you, the timeline was 2 weeks, because we recognized the urgency around what we needed to do with our community. So with regard to those training areas, I mentioned to you 70 plus. They're not just non-credit, it's a combination of credit and non-credit. Again, we wanted to make sure that we were building bridges and not just separating the two, as we oftentimes find with institutions. So whether it was a combination of business courses or construction or public service or healthcare, we made sure that we had a broad offering for these individuals who needed us most. In addition to this, We thought about the employer. You can never leave the employer out of the conversation because you want to make sure that the training is not only aligned from a skill level, but also thinking about the soft skills. So we didn't just go small when we thought about the soft skills. We actually partnered with the Myers-Briggs and together created, we were a development partner for Future Ready. Future Ready looks at the badging or credentialing of soft skills. The 5 areas that we worked on were communication, teamwork, learning styles, problem solving, and leadership. Those were all critical, and that when we polled our local employers, that's what they were saying, that it's great that they'll have the skill, but I also want to know that these soft skills are in place. So not only were we arming our adult learners with the hard skill, we were going out and we had that badge on it saying that, you know what, Mr. or Mrs. Employer, they are future ready certified to take on this new role that they are embracing by way of education. So what were some of our outcomes? This is one that I am very pleased to share because it really is what we're standing on as our foundation and continuing that even into today. 90% of our students that enrolled in our rapid credentialing program early on, they earned at least 1 credential. 90%. 5% of these students earned 2 credentials. Now you're probably wondering, well, maybe these were people that were already in school. Well, I'm happy to share with you there, 80% had never been enrolled at TCC. 80%. So it says to me, not only was the communication strategy that we had in place, but really leveraging the assets of our community, that they really are critical, and that we were able to articulate in a way that changed the mindset, created the action, because we were thinking about them in a holistic way, not just about the training, caring about their childcare, caring about, housing, really making sure that our case managers and or advisors were really well informed. You'll see here, if you were to look at the chart, that the majority of those individuals who were in vulnerable occupations before actually chose, I call it public safety roles, when they got this opportunity to get this training that would put them on a different path. So that was really pleasing to see that from healthcare to public safety, that those were the paths that they were choosing. When you think about, internally, the necessary resources, what are the key ingredients? Because you're probably thinking, wow, this sounds like you had a whole lot of people. No, it's not a whole lot of people, but it's a whole lot of people focused in the same direction. So talent, the people that you have on the bus matters. The collaborative spirit matters. That was critical to saying that, hey, all of your vice presidents, both on student affairs, academic affairs, and workforce, were working on this thing together for the betterment of our community and students. Nimbleness. You can never understate the need to be nimble or flexible when doing the work with rapid credentialing or reskilling. There's a reason that you have the emphasis on rapid, because it really has to happen quickly, which means that the foundation is critical for your success and, so honestly, for the success that you hope that your students will have. Marketing, making sure that there's a centered message, financial investment, and then, of course, looking at your established community network. I will say to you that with this last bullet, that though I mentioned the idea of collaboration, you must have a lead. You must have a lead in this effort. And for us, the Division of Workforce Development has served as that lead and also worked collaboratively to make sure that our decision-making was shared and shared. But again, you must have someone that's going to drive that and that. And for us, it made sense that it be workforce development. So what were some of those shared lessons? And I always like to communicate to the audiences from different perspectives, because clearly, I can communicate and say, hey, this is what it felt like and what went through on my end. But here I have for you the comments that came from the folks that were on the front line, the program coordinator and student affairs and workforce development, that when we started down this path of rapid credentialing, what did they think were things that we really needed to pay attention to and remember? And for them, again, from the frontline perspective, is that individualized services makes the biggest impact on students. Seeing them one at a time, not grouping them, that really being intentional and looking at that individual student. Being prepared to talk more than just training, which meant for that line staff, I had the tools that I needed to make sure that I could convey about other resources that would allow this student to be a successful student. I'm going to jump over to student affairs. The common point there is that personal connections are critical. Again, we're talking about being human-centric and really keying in on the student. You say that's what we've been doing. Well, that's what you're going to have to continue, especially with the adult learner. And then lastly, from a workforce development perspective, understanding your audience is critical to any initiative. And together with those combined perspectives, it really led to the success of Be Essential. Now let's fast forward, because Be Essential is, of course, back. We go back to 2020, 2021, but now there's a new call, the call that still is resonating with us all. And that call is around enrollment. Number of institutions experiencing enrollment decline. Here you look at the number here, says the spring's overall college enrollment fell 16.9 million from 17.5, clearly pointing out that it's a 7 times worse decline than a year earlier, and the largest in year-over-year percent. We're all seeing that. We're all seeing and wondering, what is it that we can do? Well, I will tell you that the adult learner population is certainly a place that you can spend your time and investment in, really focusing in on lifelong learning, because it's one door that they're entering your institution, but really thinking about, it doesn't matter whether they make that start at workforce development or whether they make it on the degree side of the house. Clearly, it's about a continuation. So if you don't get lost on that, I will tell you that there is clear success that you can experience. The other, we always want to talk about the stats, because I think it's important for you to know where you're going and what everyone is seeing just in terms of the landscape. But from spring of 2011 to spring of 2022, we saw 3.3 million students, or 17% of enrollment just, lost. Additionally, we point out with the pandemic that it brought on a 7% enrollment decline as well. So it is clear that the different factors beyond our control have impacted us, but it doesn't have to be that way. So as a bottom line, to just kind of sharing with you the TCC story, what we saw that when we reimagine the work that we're doing from a rapid credentialing perspective, we saw a 165% increase in workforce enrollments. That's not an error. It's not 16%. It's not 15%. It's 165% increase enrollments in workforce development. Additionally, we saw 85% increase in marginalized populations. That's huge. Oftentimes, we may not think about the difficulty that a student, when they're doing their decision making about whether they can pursue college or not, because there's so many different life factors yelling at them, to realize that we were able to attract this group and recognize that they can get across the finish line is absolutely huge. With regard to completion, because we know enrollment is just one part of the equation, we saw a 162% increase in workforce training completion as well. These other items that I'll share with you, and I'll do it in brief just to give you some thought on how adopting a model that is very flexible and that also resonates with employers as well as students, we have been able to capitalize on that and bring additional dollars into our college. From the point of workforce, we brought in 1.6 million last year of new dollars. We saw a regional investment of 1.7 million. And then I mentioned to you earlier some of those contracts that we have with our Department of Juvenile Justice and Department of Corrections. Those are to the tune of 16.3 million. Again, this is leveraging how we're thinking about the work that we're doing, bringing in more students, and at the same time realizing that, employers are having difficulty finding a workforce with this worker shortage. How can we then be a community problem solver for them as well? So that's how we've been able to, again, capitalize on that. As we think about the college conversation, what are some things that you need to be focusing in on and thinking about right now? For us, we had to make that acknowledgement that understanding the adult learner is an imperative. It is not a one size fits all. It is that we were very intentional about how do we understand what the needs are? How do we spend time into customizing an experience for them? The other is guiding principle. Our guiding principle is the culture of care. We're going to see that individual for who he or she is, and that it's going to be based off of the care that we want to provide to them. We're going to think seamless. That was another part of our conversation, that it really needed to be a foolproof kind of experience, that we needed to anticipate some of the challenges and barriers that this population would face. And more importantly, we had to ensure that it wasn't just a why that was heard at the leadership table or what the expectations were, but really it had to cascade up and down, and that we had to continuously communicate early and often about what it means when we bring and serve this population. So what are some of the things that we did when you think about adult learners and engagement and support? Talked about them, but in a nutshell, we really did tailor the message, initial and certainly ongoing. We thought about our services more of a one-stop, that we didn't want to have a student be routed to a bazillion different places on campus. We really wanted to make sure that we were all focused on resource and referral. We wanted to make sure that we had a flexible delivery, that in essence, our playbook couldn't be just one play. It had to be multiple pages and multiple plays that supported, best supported our adult learners. And that through that there were going to be multiple checkpoints. You know, we have advisors, as I'm sure that you all have as well, but really identifying and keying in on what those touch points or pulse points would be, and how often we did it, and what did we do with the information when we got it. And then, of course, making sure that the system was one that was clearly responsive to the needs of all that were involved. And as I make the transition and move us closer to our question and answer part of the conversation, I want to share with you just some of the other supports that we put in place. So our instructional techniques, we focused a whole lot on not losing our adult learners in one door, like perhaps workforce development, but really making sure that the community, the college as a whole, experience the success that these students were. What did we do? We stood up Skills Day. Skills Day allowed these individuals that as they were gaining the skills in the classroom, that they were able to apply them in different areas of our college. So if they were our IT or cybersecurity students, then they were also helping us out at our help desk. If they were welding or whatever the case may be, then there were projects that were assigned to them by our facilities team, so that they could apply those skills learned and really be investing and being a part of what it meant to be a student here at TCC. We also made some accommodations. This one may stir you just a bit. We had, by way of our HVAC program, we know that's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning program, had a day program as well as a night cohort. Well, the day cohort, once they got that first credential, because again, tied to what is it that they need most from us at that time, once they earned that first credential, they went directly into employment. Some might say, well, that's, what about completing the program? Well, for us, what we did was then we flipped it and then made that day program an evening program in the middle of the semester, because we needed to meet our students where they needed us most. We wanted them to complete. We recognized that they gained jobs for daytime. We then offered that program as a PM course. Other things that we've been very intentional about is making the connection between classroom to paycheck. It is not odd for us to have employers that make the offers first, our students enroll so that they know that they're working towards going into the job that they've already gotten the offer for. We do that as a cohort. And then lastly, just really connecting with their motivations. Why are they there? What is it that they need from us to get them there? And that we're continuously talking about how they get there and celebrating along the way their different milestones. We couldn't do any of that if we didn't focus on self-care as well. And again, across the United States, we've just seen it overall, the need for mental health and just services and support. So we've definitely infused that even in our rapid credentialing programming. We've not provided those services. We've actually been very intentional to say that this group needs it more than others, in that we recognize they're going to be here for a short window of time. So we don't want to miss the opportunity for them to do well, be successful, but also for them to come back because they recognize the value of what we've been able to provide. And then lastly, just establishing a real go-to menu of services. What does that mean? That it's not about just talking about rapid credentialing, but really it's about the overall college and where that fits along the period of their life, really embracing lifelong learning. And with that, my friend Anna, and all the other friends that I've gained along the way by way of the presentation, love to open it up for question and answers.
Thank you, Dr. Moore, and thank you for sharing your contact information. I'm not sure if folks can see my camera, but that's okay. I think one of the first questions that I saw pop up was around credit, non-credit transitions. And specifically how to track students who are transitioning between credit and non-credit programs, or even switching between non-credit and another non-credit program. And, you know, for me, I'll just add a comment. Your presentation centered so much on not only meeting the students where they were at, but also paying close attention to what they were doing, what were the stop gaps, you know, where areas that they could potentially use more support. So it sounds like there is, you know, this concentrated approach to monitoring students overall. So I would
Yes.
love more information about that personally.
Sure. So there is ongoing conversation throughout, and I will tell you that if the door that our students choose to go in is actually workforce development first, then we are working closely with our provost as with our student affairs vice president to talk about how do we then create the bridge and our local articulations that make it fairly seamless for them to go to the next step. I'll use as an example cybersecurity. We have both a feeder program as well as our standard clock hour workforce program. Well, when they complete, our students complete and earn a credential, we're the first on our text messaging campaign texting those students to say, hey, by the way, now that you have this credential, this puts you in line for 12 college credits. So now let's make the step over to the credit side so that you can pursue a degree. So really it's about knowing as much about my programs, and then of course the provost knowing about what's happening in her area, and really just sharing that information and making sure that student affairs is not left out of it with our call centers and with our advising. We're intentional. We share on a monthly basis. Here's what's new coming out. Even with the training and onboarding of my new staff, I actually work with the call center staff and student affairs to make sure that they are aware of what the resources is. So it's a lot of making sure that we are touching all bases and communicating again early and often.
I love that it's not just student monitoring at the end of the semester, it's happening in real time. And
Yes.
it sounds like there's there's the proof is in the pudding in terms of the outcomes for your students. Couple more great questions coming through. One of my favorite topics, accountability. Who is accountable for making this all happen?
So again, I come from a program just kind of design. I mean, being in economic and workforce development, you're always standing up something else. So my colleagues are at the table always, but in terms of the implementation and reporting out on the effectiveness of these efforts, that falls within this division. But again, it's because stakeholders are at the table, and we actually have what's called stakeholder meetings, and that includes whether it's CFO, our financial aid office, or IT. We have those meetings on a set basis to talk about what did we learn, i.e. definitely don't want to leave out institutional effectiveness. But yeah, for these efforts that I'm discussing now, it's through workforce, and then we do it in collaboration in terms of the decision making.
And then not a follow-up question, but an additional question around support for childcare. I think we're all hoping for more information about that, just given the prevalence of this conversation.
Sure. So we actually partnered with for us, it's the Early Learning Coalition, and they actually have a number of childcare partners underneath their umbrella, and they provide funding for them. And then of course the childcare is subsidized for those who receive it. We partnered with them through our distribution of services that they were part of, saying that, hey, we're part of the Be Essential campaign. If you need childcare, they were even on site to help better support, even as a student was planning and figuring out, how am I going to fit this into my world? How will I add school? Because I'm also doing work as well, that they were here on campus. They weren't this thing that we said, hey, by the way, let me refer you. They were here with us.
Great. I think that's it for the questions. but also wanted to lift up, a couple of the comments that were coming through as you were delivering this presentation. Lots of appreciation, well, one, for the conversation roadmap, but your second map around community of care, which for me, it reminds me that many hands make light work, personally, and sometimes there are supports kind of in non-traditional areas as well. Karen Stout had mentioned multiple checkpoints are key, and the way that the checkpoint is designed, which I love, must meet adult learner needs. It's a different checkpoint than for a first-time full-time student. This may seem obvious, but many colleges don't customize the check-in experience around what they know about the students and what they need. This is, I think it's a comment, but it could be a question. So Chelsea had said, these points are great. I'm really interested to hear how all of this information is tracked and made accessible to staff so students aren't telling their stories over and over.
So we actually, at the onset, because we recognize, and I'll give you a starter with Be Essential, we realized that, we didn't have them to the point of registering for TCC, because these were students that, these were prospective students. They weren't, really even sure that they could do this thing. So we actually agreed upon a short survey, and through that survey got basic information, and from there we knew that we needed to attach the human side of the human touch, and so we had someone contact them immediately, and this was from our advising and counseling, because again, our approach was going to be the concierge model, and from there then we all had access to the information: student affairs, academic affairs, workforce. And once we got it, made it to the point where the student was willing to enroll, then we all had access. It's not, I've heard across the state and sometimes nation that there are multiple systems that workforce development goes in versus the academic and credit. We're in one learning management system. So as we're tracking there, they can all see the same progress. Of course, with the reporting out, I've always found it important to report out to the group and talk about and hear from their vantage point as well. So there were set meetings. There continue to be set meetings that talk about this particular population and what is it that we can do more. Is it effective? And again, the proof is in the pudding on that when we look at our enrollment numbers and certainly the completion that came because of this concentrated effort.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. We're getting some more questions, and actually someone said, as a faculty, where do we start? I definitely want to delve deeper into helping students and meeting them where they are. Great presentation. I'm inspired. Me too, Professor McCoy.
Well, thank you very much. And I've been inspired for the 10 years that I've been in education as well. I never thought I'd be in education, but certainly it's someone that's place that's added to my heart. So where do you start? Clearly you start with the conversations of, here's the deal. A lot of folks and may not find value in these standing committees that we all have on our campuses, but standing committees are actually a great place to have them because it's a cross section of your college community and campus. And that's where, a lot of, we didn't talk about them today, but a lot of our initiatives have come out of standing committees where we have embraced the fact that, hey, let's talk about this. How can we improve this? What if we did this? I would venture to say that you will probably find some of the same results that we did, and that the conversations can be sparked there, and that it can lead to a rolled up conversation of action, because it only takes one to carry that when you're thinking about your executive leadership team, and then messaging that and becoming an ambassador for that through the remainder of the leadership team. So that I would encourage that, and just make sure that once this is an area of concern, that you communicate it throughout. If there are channels that you all use by way of surveys. That's how we inquire a lot with our faculty and others. I would say then use that as an opportunity to say, I want to delve deeper and figuring out how I can best serve the student. Yeah.
Thank you for that answer. And it looks like the crowd enjoyed your response as well. I have a question because you had mentioned, I didn't expect to love education so much. And since you're coming from the workforce side, I don't know if you have any insights or highlights or lowlights from your experience transitioning from the workforce side to a community college, if there are things that, you know, are barriers to really meeting the workforce need from your impression, kind of making that transition?
Sure. So, again, from the workforce side of it, having led workforce and economic on the outside, there was always these questions of why won't education just give it to me like we need it? Why do we have to wait 2 years to get it? Why do we have to wait 1 year? But hey, we need this. Why can't they change it? Why do they have to send it through these committees that they talk about? And I didn't know either. And so I said, when I got an education, I posed the question like, why are we doing it like this? And I realized that we don't have to do it the way that we've been doing it, that there really is flexibility to create for employers just-in-time training, the training that they need, because when you do that, they become true champions of it. And as you saw with the investment that they've made in our college, they haven't made that investment because we've been traditional. They made that investment because we were nimble and met their needs, and they saw it as an opportunity to get their talent, both their new talent, as well as work with their incumbent workforce. So for me, it's been a whole lot of recognizing and appreciating and being very thankful to faculty and the work that they do and my instructors, but also being the first to champion that there's a different way that we can think about it. It's not the sole way, but it certainly is a different way. And then sharing the vantage point of employers and why that is critically important to how we serve students, because we are all student centered and we want the best for the student, but we got to know what the end game is. And if the end game is to work with our employers in the community, then we certainly need to be making sure that we're delivering the talent and the student that's going to align with that best opportunity for them.
There's another question in the chat around collaborating across the different departments. And I know that in any sort of reform work, getting people on the same page and generating the buy-in is so important, where you're not going to get anywhere near the finish line without it. So Julia had asked early on in the conversations, what resonated most with other teams across the college to engage with you on this? Especially the folks who were most skeptical or apprehensive. That's what I'm
Yeah, there were those skeptical folks. Well, it's because I first sought information to figure out what would probably be a pain point for them and addressed it when I was doing the program design. I acknowledged that, hey, I know that in the past when the colleges led this effort, this didn't necessarily feel so good and this didn't work out. I want to make sure that we're hearing and acknowledging that now. So let's look at, how would you put this together? And literally just creating the buy-in by asking the questions so that they are a designer, a co-author, if you will. And that is what really moved it fast and quickly. And again, I can't think of even better champions around this campus now, whether it's our academic affairs and student affairs partner. They embrace the fact that we're not just singly focused, but that we really are a one college that has a variety of different, I call it pathways to get a student there, but they all lead to success. So yeah, it was just, really asking them the questions and making sure I acknowledge what mattered to them.
I love that. Gabrielle is asking, how are you able to work with financial aid in order to be able to approve financial aid applications within 48 hours? I froze when I heard that.
No, I told you, nobody ever thought that would be possible. Again, working through what would be the challenge, what is it that I need to know about your process to make sure that I'm not violating anything that, is required. If I do this thing, you still have a checks and balance, but realizing our financial aid director, Bill Spires, realizing, Bill, that we need to be fast and quick with these individuals. They can't wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks to find out whether this thing is going to happen. They need to know in a couple of days. We've set up an automated process. Form was online. We wouldn't even have to, take the paper and hey, move it around. We even engaged DocuSign and all of that to make it quick and efficient. And that ultimately it still got recorded in a system, but the sign off, I understood the criteria. I knew what it was that he needed to have met. We were doing that. We actually went above that. And it's worked, and we haven't pulled back. And again, guys, we think about this. We started this in 2020. So we've been doing it for a while now and continue it.
I think I saw someone with their hand up unless my eyes are playing tricks on me. Was it,
So that was me.
all right, go ahead.
There was a question in the chat, and I was curious as well, is the daycare. So how are you working with daycare? Where does the funding come from? And then also, how are you tracking the information? How are you tracking data?
So I don't have to, with the childcare, it's not our funding. If one of the things that I have leveraged well from the business side of it is that I love spending other people's money. So this isn't the college's funding. I knew that our early learning childcare partner had received additional funding and that there are dedicated funding. It depends on what the priority areas are for the particular counties. And knowing that, then I knew how to best position our students, our prospective adult learners, to say, hey, they're going to be eligible because they're vulnerable as, and again, think about it, we're in the poorest zip code as well. So it met all of their check boxes. So there was not a risk of that, hey, we're going to have to figure out the childcare. I never think about it as something that we have to do. It's never to do a duplication of service. It's to connect the dots. And what we did in that case and continue is connect the dots. So when you're talking about tracking, so the tracking is by way, if it's a special initiative, then there is special coding in our learning management system. So then we're able to follow those individuals to figure out and know where they are in our system and what credentials have been earned, did they complete. If it's part of our general population, then we're able to run reports because again, it's one system. So not a tracking issue for us. And we have an amazing IE team, institutional effectiveness, that I promise you, she knows where everything is and does a phenomenal job.
Thank you. I did put another question in the chat. I just wanted to know, who does your team consist of? Like, who are you pulling to the table? I mean, you talked about that a little bit, but on a day-to-day basis, who are you working with that's working to get this connection in the community to find these partners who have these dollars for daycare? And then who are you sending out to do this part? And how are those things all working together and the moving parts coming together to make such a dynamic program?
I will tell you that that's why I think there's value in having come from the outside. So I came with partnerships. So whether it was United Way board, or whether it was a chamber board, or whether it was Early Learning Coalition, or whether it was our Innovation Park, or whether it was the WIOA board, I'd either work or serve there. So it wasn't a matter, though I still have to nurture relationships because CEOs and leaderships change at their locations too. It really is about being engaged and a part of the community then and now. So I am actively engaged with the nonprofits. I'm not just sending an email and saying, hey, I hope that you read it. These people, I have their cell phone numbers, and that's, that you cannot underestimate the power and value of partnerships. Because again, many of the things that we do, I'm spending people's money all day because it's, they realize that it's a win-win for the both of us when we do it. In terms of team, I have directors that are within my division, and every director has a responsibility. They know that we are partner focused. We maintain one, I call it portal, if you will, on the relationships that are either being nurtured or going out there and that we're trying to cultivate. We're figuring out who's talking to them, what are the opportunities. We're all seeing that in one place. Very, very system-like, but it's to ensure that we're not duplicating and that we're all learning and leveraging partnerships at the same level. Now, it's also what I bring the value to bring to the college, because I then share that information with student affairs and academic affairs. So it's not just a workforce relationship, it's a college relationship. Yeah.
Thank you. And I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I have so many questions. And so can I ask one more question? Is that okay? How do you keep your directors? You said you're very partner focused, and that's a big deal. So how do you keep your directors from working in silos and being territorial?
we have director collaboration meeting. I had that earlier today, as a matter of fact, and we're talking about our pain points, we're talking about our successes, we're hearing whether it's, whether it's communication, whether it's marketing, if someone figures out something and it's amazing, then okay, let's share that amazing, the division needs to be amazing, the college needs to be amazing. So we are all about sharing, but again, that is driven by, I call it, I said, there's going to be the conversations, and I make sure it's on our calendar, and then there needs to be the conversations or collisions that you all create, and you need to foster this within your teams and in your departments. That communication has to be the strength of what we do. Mhm.
Thank you so much.
And Anna, I don't know if we have others or not. Questions?
I'm doing another lap through.
Okay,
the
sure
to make
thing.
sure I didn't forget anything.
Thank you, Karen, for that shout out.
It does look like we don't have any more questions in the chat, but we just want to say an extra thank you today for the both of you on the presentation. If you like to give your contact information or not, we will be able to give, the slides will be available to you all, the attendees. And so thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. I love learning and sharing. So I look forward to seeing you all throughout the United States, because you're from everywhere, but thank you for the opportunity, ATD. Mhm.
I guess the only thing I'll close with, thank you for an amazing conversation, and Dr. Moore for an incredible presentation, but not just the presentation, the work that you're doing and the impact that you're making. Some of the themes that I heard in the conversation, and as well as the questions, I just want to do a shameless plug. I'll be transparent about it, that ECMC Foundation is really excited about work like this, helping students gain, the college experience at the same time as gaining workforce aligned skills. In addition, we do have a single mother's portfolio. I don't oversee that directly, but I know that our program officer, Amber, would be happy to connect you with resources or ideas about how to get support for some of those resources as well. So I'll share my email in the chat here, but I'll also share our website. And I look forward to hearing from each and every one of you. And the last thing I'll say is we have an open letter of inquiry process, so you don't need to know anyone at the foundation. Now you know me though. You don't need to know anyone at the foundation in order to submit. So I'm going to share the link to our website here, and looking forward to hopefully continuing this conversation in the coming months as well.
Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, guys.